Frank Becker had always enjoyed the quiet solitude of his 100-year-old Victorian home, a piece of history nestled among the modern cookie-cutter houses that had sprung up around him. The house had been in his family for generations, long before the surrounding neighborhood was developed and long before anyone had even heard of a homeowners association. That was why, when he pulled an official-looking letter from his mailbox one morning, he had no reason to suspect it would be anything other than routine. But as he read the contents, his heart pounded with disbelief and rising fury. The letter, sent from an entity calling itself the Springwood Homeowners Association, informed him that he owed over $11,000 in unpaid fines for violations of their community guidelines. His mailbox, they claimed, was not compliant with approved designs. His home's paint color did not meet neighborhood standards. His 100-year-old oak tree exceeded the acceptable height limit. And worst of all, he had failed to pay his mandatory homeowner association membership dues. The final line threatened legal action and potential liens on his property if he did not settle the outstanding amount immediately. Frank scoffed, his hands tightening around the paper. This had to be some kind of mistake. His house wasn't part of any homeowner association. It predated the entire development. The homeowner association had no authority over him, and he had certainly never signed any agreement granting them such power. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he drove straight to the homeowner association office, a sleek, modern building that looked out of place with its polished glass windows and corporate aesthetic. Inside, a receptionist greeted him with a rehearsed, overly pleasant smile. When he explained the issue and handed over the letter, she barely blinked as she typed his address into her computer. "Yes, Mr. Becker," she said in a tone that suggested she had done this before. "Hush, your property is listed under the Springwood Homeowner Association jurisdiction." "That's impossible," Frank snapped. "I've lived here for decades. My house was here before this neighborhood even existed. I never agreed to join your homeowner association." The receptionist's expression remained neutral. "I understand, sir, but our records show that under a newly passed zoning amendment, your property now falls within our community boundaries. That means you are required to comply with our regulations and fee structure." Frank felt his blood pressure spike. "You can't just force me into your homeowner association. That's not how property law works." She offered a bland, well-practiced smile. "You'll need to speak with Mr. Dawson, our homeowner association president, if you wish to dispute the matter." Frank wasted no time, pushing past her before she could offer to schedule an appointment. He stormed toward the glass-paneled office at the end of the hall, flinging the door open without knocking. Behind the desk sat a man in his 50s, dressed in a sharp navy suit, exuding the kind of smug authority that instantly set Frank on edge. The nameplate on the desk read Richard Dawson, Homeowner Association President. Dawson barely glanced up from the stack of papers he was reviewing. "Ah, Mr. Becker," he said smoothly, "I was expecting you." Frank didn't bother with pleasantries. He threw the letter onto the desk. "This is a mistake. My property is not part of your homeowner association." Dawson leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together. "I assure you, Mr. Becker, it is. The City Council approved the expansion of our jurisdiction last year. Your property now falls within our neighborhood regulations." "You can't just claim my house like some kind of land grab," Frank said, his voice rising. "I never signed anything agreeing to this." Dawson let out an exaggerated sigh. "I understand this is a difficult adjustment, but the rules apply to everyone. If you refuse to comply, we have the legal right to pursue enforcement measures. That includes placing liens on your property and, if necessary, foreclosure." Frank's stomach turned. Foreclosure? Over some made-up homeowner association fees and paint color violations? This was beyond absurd. It was outright extortion. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "You can try," he said coldly, "but I guarantee you won't win." Dawson smirked, the kind of arrogant grin that suggested he had seen many people fold under the weight of homeowner association bureaucracy. "We'll see about that, Mr. Becker." As Frank walked out of the office, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about fines or homeowner association rules. They were after his property, and he wasn't about to let them take it without a fight. Frank spent the entire drive home replaying his conversation with Richard Dawson in his mind, his grip on the steering wheel tightening with every passing thought. The sheer audacity of the homeowner association to claim his property as part of their jurisdiction without his consent was outrageous. His house had stood long before the neighborhood existed, before any of these self-important board members even moved into the area, and now they wanted to dictate how he maintained his home? The thought made his blood boil. He wasn't about to let some glorified neighborhood committee rob him of his rights, but first, he needed to understand exactly what he was up against. As soon as he stepped inside his house, he went straight to his study, pulling open the old wooden filing cabinet in search of his property deed. If there was any legal standing to what the homeowner association was claiming, it had to be in writing somewhere. After rifling through decades of records, he finally pulled out the original deed, along with some historical documents dating back to his grandfather's ownership. His property was explicitly listed as an independent, non-homeowner association residence, meaning he was never part of any association. No contracts, no agreements, nothing that would have ever subjected him to their rules. Satisfied with his proof, he set the documents aside and opened his laptop, searching for information on the so-called zoning amendment that Dawson had mentioned. After a few minutes of digging, he found the city council meeting records from last year. Sure enough, a proposal had been submitted by the Springwood Homeowner Association requesting an annexation of unregulated properties surrounding the neighborhood, claiming it was for the sake of community consistency and uniformity. The request had been approved in a barely contested vote, slipping through unnoticed by anyone who wasn't actively watching for it. The wording was intentionally vague, making it seem as though it only applied to undeveloped land or properties that had previously expressed interest in joining the homeowner association. But in reality, it was a blatant overreach, and Frank had no doubt that it was a deliberate attempt to absorb homes like his into their control. His stomach twisted in anger. The entire thing had been orchestrated behind closed doors, pushed through quietly so that homeowners like him wouldn't have a chance to object. How many others had been affected? Were there other people in the same situation, blindsided by fines and demands they never agreed to? He needed to find out. Determined to get answers, he decided to pay a visit to his neighbors. Most of them had moved into Springwood long after the homeowner association had been established, but there were a few old-timers like him who had been around before the association existed. He started with Ruth Wilkins, an elderly woman who had lived 2 streets over for nearly 40 years. When he knocked on her door, she answered with a warm smile that quickly faded when he mentioned the homeowner association fines. "Oh, Frank, it's happening to you too?" she sighed, shaking her head. "Those vultures sent me a letter last month telling me I owed nearly $6,000 in back dues. Can you believe it? I never signed up for any of their nonsense." Frank's suspicion deepened. "And what did you do?" "I wrote them a letter telling them to get lost," she said firmly. "Then a few weeks later, I got another notice saying they'd be pursuing legal action if I didn't comply. I tried calling the city, but all they said was that the amendment made it legal." She shook her head. "It's not right, Frank. They're trying to push us out." Frank felt a wave of determination wash over him. If Ruth was being targeted too, there was no doubt others were caught in the same trap. He spent the rest of the afternoon visiting every longtime homeowner in the area, and the stories were eerily similar. Letters demanding compliance, threats of liens, unexplained fines. Some had already caved, reluctantly paying the fines just to avoid a drawn-out battle. Others, like Ruth, were standing their ground but had no idea what to do next. By the time he got back home, Frank was more convinced than ever that this wasn't just about enforcing community standards. It was a deliberate scheme. The homeowner association was trying to absorb the last independent properties, likely in an attempt to increase their control and revenue. If they could get away with this, they could set a precedent for other homeowner associations to do the same, slowly eroding homeowners' rights under the guise of community improvement. He wasn't going to let that happen. Pulling out his phone, he called a local real estate attorney, someone who had experience dealing with homeowner association disputes. After explaining the situation, the lawyer, Daniel Reed, agreed to meet with him the next morning. He also suggested that Frank start gathering evidence. Every letter, every communication, every relevant document that could prove the homeowner association had overstepped its bounds. Frank spent the rest of the evening assembling his case, carefully organizing the records he had gathered. He printed out the city council meeting minutes, highlighting the vague wording of the zoning amendment. He collected statements from neighbors who were willing to speak out, documenting their experiences with the homeowner association's harassment. He even pulled up old aerial maps of the area, proving that his home had existed long before Springwood's development began. By the time he was finished, he had a thick folder of evidence, ready to present to Reed. As he sat back in his chair, exhaustion creeping in, he couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was only just beginning. The homeowner association had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated him. They thought they could intimidate him, drown him in legal threats until he gave in. But they had picked the wrong homeowner to bully. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. The next morning, Frank arrived at the law office of Daniel Reed, a real estate attorney known for handling property disputes, particularly cases involving overreaching homeowner associations. The moment Frank stepped into the office, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every homeowner the Springwood Homeowner Association had tried to strong-arm into compliance. After checking in with the receptionist, he was led to Reed's office, where the attorney greeted him with a firm handshake. Reed was in his early 40s, sharp-eyed and confident, the kind of lawyer who knew how to dismantle a case with precision. "Mr. Becker," Reed said, motioning for Frank to take a seat, "I've reviewed the summary you sent me last night. This homeowner association situation is more than just a nuisance. It's a blatant overreach. They're attempting to impose retroactive control over properties they have no legal claim to. You were right to push back." Frank nodded, placing the folder of evidence on the desk. "I've gathered everything I could. Historical records, my property deed, even statements from neighbors who are also being targeted." Reed opened the folder and flipped through the documents, his brow furrowing. "Your property predates the homeowner association by decades. That alone makes their claims questionable. But what concerns me the most is this so-called zoning amendment." He pulled out a printout of the city council meeting minutes. It was passed quietly, with no notice to affected homeowners. That's a major red flag. Frank leaned forward. "Can they actually enforce it? Do they have any legal standing?" Reed exhaled, tapping his fingers on the desk. "Technically, a city council can approve an homeowner association's request to expand its jurisdiction, but that doesn't automatically make the enforcement legal. A homeowner must still opt in or have an existing contractual obligation. You never signed anything. There's no historical agreement tying your property to the homeowner association." That Frank clenched his jaw. "And if I refuse to pay?" Reed gave him a knowing smile. "Then they'll likely escalate. They'll send more letters, increase the fines, and eventually they'll try to place a lien on your home. That's their end game. They want to use the lien as leverage to either force payment or, in extreme cases, attempt foreclosure." Frank gritted his teeth. "They actually think they can take my house?" "They can try," Reed said, "but if we get ahead of them, they won't succeed." He pulled out a legal pad and started jotting down notes. "Here's what we do. First, we send them a formal cease and desist letter making it clear that you dispute their claims. We'll cite the relevant property laws and demand they provide actual legal documentation proving their authority over your land, which of course they won't have." "So," Frank nodded. "And if they ignore it, then we file a lawsuit," Reed said matter-of-factly, "not just against the homeowner association, but against the city council for approving an amendment that violates your property rights. If we bring this into a courtroom, we put them in a position where they have to prove their authority over your home, which they won't be able to do. And if we get enough homeowners to join the suit, we could turn this into a class action case." A slow smile spread across Frank's face. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear, Reed chuckled. You've got a strong case, Mr. Becker, but homeowner associations don't go down without a fight. They'll throw every bureaucratic trick in the book at you. Are you ready for that? Frank didn't hesitate. I've been living in this house longer than that entire homeowner association has existed. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. Reed nodded in approval. Then let's get started. Over the next few days, the battle lines were drawn. Reed drafted a cease and desist letter, which was sent via certified mail to the Springwood Homeowner Association's office. The letter formally disputed the Homeowner Association's authority over Frank property and demanded they cease all collection attempts immediately. In addition, Frank and a few of his affected neighbors began organizing, sharing their experiences and agreeing to join forces. Some were hesitant, fearing legal repercussions, but Frank reassured them this was a fight worth having. As expected, the Homeowner Association responded exactly as Reed had predicted. A week later, Frank received another letter, this time from the Homeowner Association's legal team. The tone was aggressive, warning that refusal to comply would result in escalated enforcement actions. The letter claimed the Homeowner Association was well within its rights to fine him and that continued noncompliance could result in further legal consequences. Frank smirked. They were bluffing. He forwarded the letter to Reed, who was already preparing their next move. They're trying to scare you into backing down, Reed said over the phone, but they haven't provided a single legal document proving their claims. That's good for us. That same evening, Frank got an unexpected visit. As he was locking up his front gate, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped Richard Dawson. Frank crossed his arms. Lost your way, Dawson? Dawson chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Just thought I'd drop by, have a chat. Frank eyed him warily. A chat or a threat? Dawson smirked, stepping closer. Come on, Frank. Do you really want to go through all this trouble? We both know where this is heading. Legal fees, court battles, stress. You're not getting any younger. Is it really worth it? Frank's jaw tightened. You tell me. Is it really worth it to come after my house when you know you don't have a legal leg to stand on? Dawson's smile wavered. Things would be easier if you just complied. We could even talk about a reduced fine. Frank scoffed. So now you're negotiating? Thought your letter said this was non-negotiable. Dawson's expression darkened. I'm giving you an opportunity, Becker. Take the deal, and this all goes away. Frank stepped closer, meeting his gaze head-on. I'll see you in court. Dawson's lips pressed into a thin line. He took a step back, dusting off his suit jacket. Your call, but don't say I didn't warn you. Without another word, he climbed back into his SUV and drove off. Frank watched the vehicle disappear down the street, his pulse steady. Let them come. He wasn't going anywhere. Frank barely had time to process Dawson's thinly veiled threat before the real battle began. Just as Reed had predicted, the Homeowner Association escalated its tactics almost immediately. The first sign of their retaliation came in the form of a notice taped to his front door. Final warning. Non-complicated with Homeowner Association regulations will result in legal action. Frank tore it down without a second thought. If they wanted to take this fight to the next level, he was more than ready. Within days, the pressure intensified. Another letter arrived, this one from a law firm representing the Homeowner Association, informing him that the association had officially filed a lien against his property for outstanding fees and non-compliance penalties. The amount had ballooned from the original $11,000 to nearly $18,000, citing additional administrative processing costs and late fees. The wording was deliberately intimidating, filled with legal jargon meant to instill panic. Frank could almost hear Dawson's smug voice behind the threat. You're going to lose, Becker. Give up now and save yourself the trouble. But Frank wasn't about to be bullied. He forwarded the letter to Reed, who, as expected, wasn't surprised. They're following the standard playbook, Reed said over the phone. Piling on fines, filing a lien. That's their way of trying to force your hand, but they've overplayed it. A retroactive homeowner association expansion doesn't hold up in court without your agreement. We'll counter this immediately. Frank had no time to breathe before the next move came. A process server knocked on his door the following morning, handing him an official summons. Springwood Homeowner Association was suing him for unpaid dues and non-compliance, demanding full payment of all fines and fees or face foreclosure proceedings. The court date was set, and suddenly, this was no longer just a dispute. It was an all-out war. But Frank wasn't alone. Word of the lawsuit spread quickly among his neighbors, especially those who had also received similar notices. Ruth Wilkins, the elderly woman Frank had spoken to earlier, called him in a panic. "They're doing it to me too, Frank," she said, her voice shaking. "I just got a notice saying they're suing for unpaid fees. I don't know what to do." Frank reassured her. "We fight it together." That evening, Frank gathered with a group of homeowners in his living room, people who had also been blindsided by the homeowner association's aggressive takeover. Some were scared, others were furious, but all of them wanted answers. Reed joined via video call, laying out their strategy. "The homeowner association is banking on the fact that most of you will be too intimidated to fight back. But what they don't expect is for us to hit them harder than they hit us. This isn't just a lawsuit about unpaid fines. We're countersuing." A murmur rippled through the group. One of the younger homeowners, a man named Eric, asked, "Countersuing for what?" "Fraud, harassment, and wrongful lien placement," Reed said. "They had no legal right to retroactively claim your properties. Their amendment was intentionally deceptive, and their attempt to force compliance through intimidation is a direct violation of homeowners' rights." Frank clenched his fists. "So we make them pay," Reed nodded. "Not just that. We file for an injunction to prevent them from enforcing any further fines while the lawsuit is pending. That stops them from piling on more penalties and prevents them from touching your property until this is resolved in court." The group was fired up now. The fear that had lingered at the beginning of the meeting had transformed into determination. For the first time, they weren't just reacting to the homeowner association's aggression, they were going on the offensive. The legal battle quickly turned public. Frank and a few of the other homeowners reached out to local news stations, and within days, the Springwood Homeowner Association lawsuit became a hot topic. Reporters started showing up in the neighborhood, knocking on doors, eager to cover the story of a rogue homeowner association trying to steamroll independent homeowners. The public backlash was immediate. People across the city were outraged, calling out the homeowner association's predatory tactics. Social media exploded with support, with commenters blasting the homeowner association and calling for city officials to intervene. Dawson, who had likely been confident that Frank and the others would fold under pressure, suddenly found himself on the defensive. The bad publicity forced the homeowner association board to scramble, issuing carefully worded statements about community integrity and necessary compliance measures, but it was too late. The damage was done. As the court date approached, the homeowner association's lawyers tried to pressure Frank into settling, offering to drop the lien and fines if he agreed to acknowledge homeowner association authority over his property going forward. Frank laughed in their faces. "I'd rather burn my house down than let you take it," he told them flatly. By the time they walked into court, Frank and his neighbors were ready. Reed presented a devastating case, exposing the illegality of the homeowner association's actions, the lack of homeowner consent, and the outright fraud in the zoning amendments approval process. The judge immediately questioned the legitimacy of the homeowner association's claims, demanding to see documentation proving that homeowners had voluntarily agreed to the changes. Of course, there was none. Dawson's carefully crafted scheme collapsed under legal scrutiny. One by one, every fraudulent action was exposed: the improper fines, the wrongful liens, the intimidation tactics. The judge ruled in favor of Frank and his neighbors, invalidating the homeowner association's claims and ordering them to remove all liens immediately. But Frank wasn't done yet. With their counter-lawsuit still in play, the homeowner association now faced serious financial penalties. The court ordered an independent investigation into their practices, and when evidence of fraud and harassment surfaced, it triggered multiple lawsuits from homeowners across the neighborhood. The homeowner association's legal fees skyrocketed, their credibility shattered, and after the investigation, a series of criminal lawsuits filed in the fall of 2020. By the end of it, Springwood Homeowner Association was left in ruins, and Richard Dawson forced to resign, facing personal lawsuits from homeowners who had suffered under his policies and permanently banned from serving on any homeowner association board again. Frank stood on his porch, watching as Springwood Homeowner Association's empire crumbled. The victory was more than just a legal win. It was a statement. No matter how powerful they thought they were, no matter how many threats they made, they couldn't take what was his. His house, his land, his freedom. Untouched, unshaken, unbroken. The aftermath of the lawsuit against the Springwood Homeowner Association sent shockwaves through the entire neighborhood. The ruling was clear. Frank and the other independent homeowners were never part of the homeowner association, and the association had no legal claim over their properties. But the consequences for the homeowner association didn't end there. The counter-lawsuit for fraud, harassment, and wrongful lien placement had gained momentum, drawing in more plaintiffs as other residents came forward with their own stories of bullying, intimidation, and arbitrary fines. With the court's ruling, the homeowner association was not only ordered to drop all liens and refund any collected fees, but they also faced severe financial penalties for their misconduct. The association, once a powerful governing body, dictating everything from house colors to mailbox styles, now found itself on the brink of collapse. As for Richard Dawson, the former president who had led the aggressive expansion efforts, his resignation was only the beginning of his downfall. In the days following the ruling, several homeowners filed personal lawsuits against him, accusing him of abusing his authority, falsifying documents, and orchestrating a fraudulent takeover of private properties. With mounting legal fees and his reputation in ruins, Dawson's days of unchecked power were over. The smug arrogance he had once displayed was now replaced with desperation as he tried, and failed, to salvage what was left of his career. Frank, however, was far from done. While the courtroom battle had been won, he knew that a long-term solution was needed. The homeowner association might have been weakened, but as long as it existed, it could always attempt to regain control in the future. The real fight wasn't just about his house. It was about making sure this never happened again. With the support of the independent homeowners, Frank and Reed took the case one step further. They petitioned the city council to revoke the homeowner association's ability to annex properties without explicit consent from the homeowners. The council, now under intense public scrutiny, was forced to reevaluate the zoning amendment that had enabled the homeowner association's power grab in the first place. The council members, eager to distance themselves from the growing scandal, held a public hearing. The meeting room was packed, filled with angry residents demanding justice. Local media outlets covered the event, and footage of homeowners passionately testifying against the homeowner association's unethical practices went viral. The overwhelming public pressure forced the council's hand. By the end of the hearing, they had no choice but to invalidate the zoning amendment, effectively stripping the homeowner association of its authority over any property that had not voluntarily opted in. For the first time in years, Frank and his neighbors were truly free. No more surprise fines, no more arbitrary rules, no more threats of foreclosure over non-existent violations. As the dust settled, the remains of the once powerful Springwood Homeowner Association crumbled into irrelevance. Without its aggressive fines and legal intimidation tactics, it lacked the funding to sustain itself. Board members resigned one by one, and within months, the association was formally dissolved. Frank stood on his front porch the day the final announcement came through, sipping his coffee as he watched a group of workers remove the homeowner association signs from the neighborhood entrance. The oppressive force that had loomed over the community was finally gone, and he had been a major part of making that happen. His victory was more than personal. It was a warning to every other power-hungry homeowner association that thought they could bulldoze over homeowners without consequence. But Frank wasn't just satisfied with winning his battle. He wanted to make sure no one else would have to fight the same war. A few months after the homeowner association's collapse, Frank began working with a grassroots homeowners' rights group, using his case as an example of how to stand up to corrupt homeowner associations. He helped educate others on their legal rights, showing them how to spot homeowner association overreach and push back against unlawful policies. His story was even featured in a national news segment where he spoke about the dangers of unchecked homeowner association power and the importance of knowing your property rights before signing anything. Life in the neighborhood returned to normal, but this time it was different. Homeowners no longer lived in fear of petty fines or board members peering over their fences, measuring grass lengths and paint colors. People took pride in their homes on their own terms, not because a set of arbitrary rules dictated how they should live. Frank finally felt at peace. He had spent months fighting a battle he never asked for, but in the end it had been worth every second. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun set, Ruth Wilkins walked by, waving at him with a grateful smile. "You saved our homes, Frank," she said warmly, "and you made sure we won't ever have to fight this fight again." Frank chuckled, raising his coffee mug in a mock toast. "We saved our homes, Ruth. No one's ever going to take them from us again. The war was over. The homeowner association was gone. And his home, his family's legacy, would stand untouched for generations to come."